I came into Microsoft IT to actually work on and run Microsoft's own SharePoint installation, and then I moved to Skype at Microsoft. And one thing became super clear to me during that time: even inside Microsoft, driving adoption is a thing, right? You'd think, oh, everybody's just going to use all the workloads. Well, in fact, they don't, because humans are humans. And many of the best practices that we have are based on the neuroscience of change and getting people to really want to change and helping them over their resistance to change. You're simply using technology, the technology outcome, as the goal. So I really want to make sure that everybody understands that this, at the end of the day, it's not about the tech itself. It's about what do the people need to do. And that is really if there is one silver bullet in driving adoption, it's being hyper-focused on what your user experience is and what your users need to accomplish every day, and really dedicating yourself to empowering that. That is the thing that will make the difference between an adoption program that has limited success and one that is extremely successful in my experience. So I hear that some of you have been working or know a bit about Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams really represents it's the result of Microsoft's cultural change as a company. Because it is built on the power of Exchange, it leverages OneDrive and SharePoint. Every workload in Office 365 can be accessed from it. And this kind of collaboration and cooperation, frankly, was not a part of the Microsoft culture maybe 10 years ago. So it's really amazing to get to work on this. We are a year and change old now, and we also have an extremely fast pace of new features being released. So that can be a blessing and a curse, depending upon your role in an organization. Part of my job is to help people ingest those new features and get information about them. And so, it's been a pretty interesting ride. So what I want to do now actually is I want to bounce out of the presentation for a moment, because I want to show the product just a little bit before I go into the framework of how you measure and drive adoption, because I think the real world scenario will give you some context, especially for maybe some of you who haven't seen that. So I'm showing Microsoft Teams right now in the browser window. And that's something about Teams to know, is that it's available on Android and iOS for your mobile devices, iPads, slates, all that good stuff. It also has a browser version that I'm showing here and a desktop client. And the idea is this is, from a collaboration and communications perspective, going to be the center of gravity for your cloud experience. And when I say that, I mean that it brings together, as I said, that ability to co-author documents, store documents, have productive meetings, do planning, and integrate other apps in this workspace that is built around chat. And for those of you who are using Skype for Business, you're probably familiar with instant messaging. Chat in Teams is a little bit different. And here on the desktop, over on this far left rail, you're seeing the sections of the product. The activity feed that tells you, what's going on in the teams that you care about. The chat area. And this area actually allows you to have one-on-one chats or chats with multiple people. And it's persistent. And so you can see this is a conversation that I had actually with Dan and some other folks back in September. Now, you can have retention policies against chat, so if you don't want things to stay around that long, you're in charge of that. But that ability for me to pin some of my favorite chats here in this area and be able to see them on any device is super helpful to me. Also, I can ask people questions. Last night, I asked my colleague Ashwin if he could do a broadcast for me, and he says yes this morning. So, the idea of Teams is to be able to take all those fast conversations that you are having that are actually choking your email and put them in another experience. And it actually, for me anyway, has made my email more valuable, because I'm getting more formal communications there. I'm getting longer communications there. But all those things that are like, hey, can you show up at this meeting? Can you check out this document? Have moved into the context of my work in Teams. I wanted to show briefly also, some of you said that you're planning your O365 deployment. And the idea is that you have chat for those one-on-one conversations, or one to few, kind of like a private room you can have a conversation in. But over here in the team area, a team is like a collection of people. And those people come together around a common purpose. So I do have a demonstration team here that enables me to have conversations with people. I'm also able to do things like immediately show and share documents. I'm going to say, hello, Frank. So I'm using the @message function here, which allows me to pop up automatically the name of somebody who happens to be in this team. So I'm going to say, hey, Frank, have you seen this new document? Please review it. And I'm going to go ahead and hit this attach button, and I'm going to browse the documents that are associated with this team. Now, every time you create a team in Office 365, you're also getting a SharePoint site behind it. Now, this is good news because all of the power of SharePoint, like workflows and custom lists and custom pages, are available to you in Teams. And you can also connect Teams to an existing modern site or pin an old document library into the experience if you want to. So as you move to Teams, you're not losing your previous investments in SharePoint. You're actually integrating them into a place where you can add additional functionality. So I'm looking at the documents that are associated with this team and the SharePoint site behind it. I'm going to go ahead and select this document, and I'm going to share a link. It automatically inserts a little chiclet there so it can show the document. And when I do this, he doesn't have to hunt for the document. He can see it there in the context of the conversation. He can reply and let me know, if he has seen it or not. Or, of course, he can click on this document, and it will show within the window here in the Teams area. You should think of Teams as a group of people who have a common interest, and the channels underneath are like topics. And those topics help you organize the work. And this is where it starts to get really good from an adoption perspective, because you can set up a team for a group of people who have to closely work together on a particular project or service or program, and then have these additional topic areas that help you to organize the work and organize the resources and conversation. You'll see here that I have an example group that's called M365 Deployment. A lot of the partners that I do this workshop for, who actually are delivering services to end customers, use Microsoft Teams to manage the engagements with their customer. I teach a lot of service managers and people who are accountable for Office 365 services in their organization. And work in one place with all the different people who are involved can be very helpful. And I encourage people to do that because not only can you have conversation and co-author documents, but you can configure many tabs here in each channel for all the other pieces of Office 365. So this is why we say Teams is now the center of gravity for Office 365, right, and the hub for teamwork, because not only can I have the basic functionality, if you will, of chat and file sharing, and the wiki capabilities, but I can also add in OneNote or PDFs or additional pages in SharePoint here. And once I've done that, I get this tab-like experience, which shows me much what I was showing you a moment ago, this ability to integrate in. For instance, I'm going to show this SharePoint site. This is what we call a toolkit for teamwork, which I'll make available to all of you. It's basically a SharePoint Online package for all of our adoption materials. I'll talk about that service that allows you to download this for free in a little bit, but I can integrate it right here in with my adoption and training channel, and you'll see that the experience is really nice. It is a modern SharePoint communication site. It's been stripped of kind of the navigation, so you get a real clean experience of what this page looks like. And you can do this with any page on the web as long as it's a secure address. The SharePoint pages obviously have some added functionality. But I wanted to take a minute to show the product and this idea of these teams, the channels, being able to add other Office 365 components in that area, because the power of Teams, again, is about the people. And so it's about the business scenarios that they're trying to empower. In our own organization, in Microsoft, each of our sales districts has their own team. And they have things like data and reporting, forecasting, high priority engagements as channels underneath that. Our DevOps units are units that actually provide incident support for our services, use Teams to manage incidents because there's further automation that can be done to connect incident tickets into the experience. And I'm going to go down to, this is actually my live team that I use inside Microsoft. I'm going to go down to my technical readiness channel. You'll see that my team has a lot of channels to it. And this is a best practice in terms of, as you think about moving to Teams, and SharePoint as well for that matter, really think about your information architecture a little bit and try to click up, meaning if you want a team for a project, that's fine, but it's better to have a team that has multiple projects underneath it. You want to have fewer teams with more channels. Just like in SharePoint, where you don't want, to have SharePoint sprawl, you want to make sure that you're having a little bit of governance and information architecture around teams in the same way. But I do want to show you that. So I have about 550 people in my team. It's called Office 365 Service Support and Readiness. You'll notice I work across the workload, so I didn't name it Microsoft Teams something. I named it that kind of order of magnitude bigger so I could slot things in underneath it. I have a technical readiness channel, and one of the things that I do is I have a form in Microsoft Forms that connects to a SharePoint list, and it makes this intelligent card here. This tells me that, hey, there's a feature that we need to do some more technical readiness on. And it automatically posts into my channel, and this is where I will then assign a writer to it. And so that's the kind of business process engineering and simplification that you can really do with Teams at the center of your Office 365 implementation. So, now I want to kind of switch back to the theory of what are best practices in driving adoption, but I wanted to give you that context so that you could see everything that's happening, because the other piece of this is that we are continuing to innovate in this area. If you're in Skype for Business on-prem right now, you'll be able to stay on-prem for as long as you want. We are releasing a new version of Skype for Business on-prem for instant messaging and meetings. But Microsoft Teams is going to become our communications client in the cloud. It has this integration here with my Outlook calendar. My Exchange calendar does require Exchange Online to add this functionality here. And then I'm able to schedule meetings and hold meetings. And the video and meeting experience, especially on the mobile device, is extremely high quality. The entire service backend of the product has been rebuilt on Azure, and we use Azure Media Services to deliver the experience, and it's very good. And so being able to pull together that collaboration in these teams with all the meetings you have to have and the documents you have to create without having a context switch back and forth really aids in making sure your users aren't suffering from change fatigue. Because change fatigue is a real thing in the adoption world. And it doesn't just happen around technology, it happens around people's lives. And so we have to realize that as adoption specialists, we're not the only thing that's happening in someone's life in a particular day. They have a job to do. It's often not like ours, about the technology as a core. And they have pressures from that. People have family things that are going on. And so whenever we're trying to land a new piece of, software with them, we have to realize that we're doing it within the context of this bigger, broader picture. So let me reshare this here. That's why making sure that you have a business-driven outcomes matrix is so important. This is what we call our adoption outcomes matrix, and again, you could apply it to SharePoint Online or any other technology, frankly, and I designed it in that way on purpose. But it works extremely well for a team's adoption strategy because we believe there are these 4 areas where you can measure and design outcomes for your technology adoption plan. So there are organizational and cultural outcomes, as well as individual and what we call tangible outcomes, meaning changes to an individual business process, like resolving an incident or handling, finishing an RFP for a customer. And what we advise folks to do is, as you're thinking about onboarding to new parts of Office 365, and especially Teams, think about, work with your business leaders to understand what is their business strategy and the way that they want to see transformation. Because some organizations, you can use Microsoft Teams as the center of a transformation effort, a cultural transformation. If you're trying to drive more, morale in your organization, more collaboration, a more transparent culture, break down some of the silos between divisions, Teams is a great tool for that. But if all you really want to do is just make sure that people have the right tools to get their work done in a secure way, rather than people going off and using unapproved apps on their mobile device or something, you can certainly scope the implementation to that. These tangible measures that you set in each of these pillars over employee sentiment is what we call the change quotient. And so we advocate measuring employee sentiment, whether there's a variety of surveying tools that you can use for that. At Microsoft, we have a large survey that goes out twice a year, and then a monthly pulse that we send to a certain cohort of users about a particular service. And we ask our employees, how do they feel about collaboration at Microsoft, both the people side and the tool side? And so we can get that sentiment measure. Sometimes it's just, if you're in a smaller organization, even though I think everyone should survey their employees, sometimes it's just the water cooler buzz, right? How do people feel at the water cooler about the services that they're getting an opportunity to use to get their job done? But the point is that you have to factor in that employee sentiment about their experience against the measures that are driven from the business and also from IT, to understand whether or not you're being successful in the way that you are moving forward with adoption. Once you have that conversation with your IT and business leaders, and by the way, I think I heard some of you talk about driving pilots. When we were piloting Microsoft Teams inside Microsoft, we had select business leaders that we did the pilots with. They're friendly people to IT and to the product group, and they had some clear business objectives that they were trying to solve. They needed to do collaboration with external guests. They needed to do collaboration over multiple regions. They had some other issues that they wanted to solve, and so we were able to really quickly, basically in a couple of meetings, identify what the business outcomes were, and then they were willing to give us feedback on the product very actively through the Yammer community that we provisioned to support the Teams rollout. And so that data was extremely valuable in being able to understand what is our organization's needs going to look like as we go through and drive to into the next phase of adoption. When we do our adoption work, we have, and I'll give you all access to, I actually have a project file that is called a Microsoft Service Adoption Plan. And you can turn it into an Excel file if you want to, if you don't happen to use Microsoft Project. But it involves multiple work streams that are kind of necessary to think about as you embark on a Teams journey. As Teams becomes that center and replaces the client for Skype for Business Online, many of you will be working in Teams, and so to get the most benefit from it, it's important you think of these success factors. So these success factors support the outcomes matrix and the strategy that you set with your service stakeholders and with your business partners inside your company. And then when you start to think about the tactical execution of your adoption plan, there's a technical work stream that makes sure, for instance, your conference room equipment is ready if you're going to do videos and voice, or you think about which scenarios you're going to be working on. But these success factors are an important component of just making sure you kind of check the box. Like, hey, who are the people on your collaboration improvement team? Do you have an executive sponsor for this work in your organization? I do these presentations and I talk to customers all around the world, and every implementation at a customer's that does not have an executive sponsor, somebody who really gets it at that high level, is slow and painful for the customers and worse for the users. Because what happens is in those implementations, there's not really that end-to-end vision for what collaboration should be like in the company. And so people either go only half in or they turn on everything, and then users are confused and frustrated. So I really encourage you to make sure that you have executive sponsorship in your organization, whatever that may look like, depending on the size of your company, because it's really helpful to have that top-down support. But those aren't the only people, right? There is that executive sponsor, but there's also people in the business units. These are often mid-level managers, the people who are in the trenches doing the work. In any change project, often they're the folks that get forgotten. There's usually a groundswell, of people who are trying to do something differently and be more efficient. So that's the grassroots level of change. And then hopefully you have that executive sponsor. But it's really the mid-level managers and the people in the middle who actually make it happen. So if you don't have an internal users group in your organization, I highly suggest that you start one. I was the one who started the one here at Microsoft. I started them all through over Southern California, and those active championed groups and user groups inside a company of people who are really interested in driving the change or accountable for it at a business unit level are absolutely critical to getting over that hump and really changing people's behavior. Because they're the folks who can understand the scenarios that are relevant to the unit. When I do work in healthcare, we talk about patient care scenarios. Manufacturing, it's about design and delivery of design information all the way to the manufacturing floor on someone's mobile device. But it's really those business scenarios that make people's eyes light up. And nobody knows that better than the folks who are right there in the actual unit trying to do that work. One of the things that's different about the best practices of Office 365 adoption, and absolutely for Microsoft Teams, is the need to do some marketing communication around it. We call it the awareness pillar, and that awareness pillar is, folks, there's about 20% of people in any company that will just embrace the change because they want to do something new and they want to be more efficient. They can see the potential of technology. But if they don't know that the service exists or that you're there to help them make that journey, then they don't know. And so we have what we call a customer success kit, and it provides some boilerplates for posters and flyers and email templates to let folks know about Microsoft Teams and to help them along that Teams journey. And I often tell customers to just use them as an example. You can use them out of the box, but if you have your own brand you want to apply, or you can just use them as inspiration about how you can drive a awareness campaign in your organization about the new service. We have internally at Microsoft what we call the Art of Teamwork Tour, and that is our level 100 and 200 classes that we're giving to Microsoft employees on Microsoft Teams. We're running them all over the world. We're videotaping them so that they are available on stream internally. I actually happen to have an L100 course that's available on my YouTube channel, which I'll share with you in a little bit, but making sure that people are aware of the resources that are available to them is huge, and a big piece of really getting folks to do what's necessary. In many IT departments, there are also people who are actually accountable for going out and essentially evangelizing technology to the business. At Microsoft, we call those folks engagement managers, but whatever, it can just be a program manager. But the job is you have the technology in the back of your mind, but you're talking to that business group, you're getting their requirements, and then you're actually running an onboarding with that division. Even though we turned on the service for every Microsoft employee, our onboarding and migration plan is actually being done by division at Microsoft because obviously we are a large corporation. We can't just do everything at once, and we also are testing things before they get to you. And so the training and migration plan has a schedule to it, and that schedule is based on, business need, but also the overall structure of how we are landing our adoption teams around the world. This is an example of that. And again, you can adopt this if you're a smaller organization, whatever size you happen to be. At the end of the day, it's really about having that executive sponsorship, the overall service adoption team, or sometimes I like to call them that collaboration improvement team. That includes core IT people as well as business folks coming together. And if you do have a large organization where there's multiple units, for instance, recently I just did a presentation to the president of our U.S. sales division and explaining to her and her leadership team how they were going to retire Skype for Business online and move into Teams wholly with that design I was talking about of her teams and districts and divisions. And she nominated somebody from her leadership team to be our point of contact to drive forward the integration. So that's that business integration lead there. And then we are recruiting champions from the U.S. business to join our internal champion program. And those champions are really important because we train them more. We have a monthly meeting for them. And so we give them a forum inside Teams so they can ask questions. And they have direct access to us in the product group. And we really help them, drive change in their unit. They also have to do some other work. It's an actual part of their job in the sense that they hold office hours, they conduct their own training, they provide support to folks as they're making the transition to Teams. So, this idea that it's only IT or you have to get it from a contractor or it's only about the training class, what I'm really trying to land is that it's a joint effort to get the most out of Office 365. And large or small, maybe you're an organization where you're going to wear multiple hats, right? When I first started in SharePoint, I was a group of one. There was me. And so I did the training, I did the solution design, I built the servers, I built this SharePoint farm, and that was what I did. And actually I'm really grateful for that experience because I learned so much about all the different roles and the work that had to be done. So if you're in that situation, it certainly can be done. Managing teams in the cloud is much simpler than those old on-prem SharePoint farms that I used to have to manage. So, though this shows this large kind of heavyweight thing for a large company, it can become very agile very quickly. It's all based on those relationships, though, and having that right information so that you can set your KPIs and your success measures about how you're going to measure success with some precision. I usually spend, when I work with a customer, we have a customer engagement team here inside the product group. And when we work with customers, we spend quite a bit of time early on helping them to define these success measures. How are you going to measure success? It's not about use of the product, right? It's about how are we impacting your business. And also, are we enabling and motivating people to change? Are they coming to our classes? Are they using the application? Certainly, but are they happy with it? Are they adopting the new process? If I roll out a new way for people to complete an RFP in a sales business process, but they're still doing it the old way, then somehow I've missed the boat. And so adopting those new processes and centering them in Teams, helping to move things out of email that are then kind of hidden if somebody new comes into the team, whereas in Teams you can see that information, that's what leads to the real business value. So being able to measure things with some clarity and know what you're measuring before you embark upon the journey is an extremely useful thing to be able to do. So as you think about those measures and you think about the product, there are different ways that you can implement Microsoft Teams. So overall, we have these 5 phases. This is a very high-level version of the Microsoft project file I was referring to. Bringing the team together, having that collaboration improvement team, making sure you have those prioritized business scenarios, and that's an iterative process. You identify some for the pilot, and then you continue to identify them as you do a rollout, a rolling rollout, and continue to deepen the engagement. You have to do the technical plan because there's a phase of technical planning for teams that includes setting your governance policy, your security policies. Are you going to allow third-party applications as a company? Are you going to allow external guests as a company? Those are 2 of the big questions. There are other questions around the retention policies that you can set in Office 365. Microsoft Teams is built on top of Office 365 capabilities. So all of the retention policies that you're likely accustomed to, or e-discovery capabilities that you're accustomed to if you're a larger organization, are applicable to Microsoft Teams. So retention policies, e-discovery, legal hold, this works for chat and calling and meetings. It already works for obviously all the SharePoint documents, but all of that is available in the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center that comes with your subscription. So depending on the level of license that you have. So, but those are the kinds of things that making sure that your network is ready for video traffic. If you're going to support meetings and video, there's some network planning that is really critical to making sure people have a good experience. That is, by the way, something that's very important in Skype for Business Online as well. But sometimes we find customers didn't do enough planning for Skype for Business Online video. Also, admittedly, the service sometimes has some issues. And so as we're moving people from Skype for Business Online to Teams, excuse me, we want to make sure that they have, done all the technical planning that will support the business outcome. So you go through this process of pilots and broad onboarding, and again, this is an ongoing process. In the project plan, you'll see that there's a lot of focus up front and in that initial pilot, getting the support systems online, making sure you have feedback measures, just to hear back from your employees. And then it's a rinse and repeat, right? Once you build that, I'll call it the infrastructure for your adoption plan, you're able to scale it up and expand it on an iterative basis as you move people through the system and help them through the organizational change. That's one of the things about this information here. So, this slide makes it look like there's only 2 swim lanes, but in reality, that's actually not true. There are 2 that you can manage, let me put it that way, in the sense that your organization has a change journey. Especially if you're using Teams like we are to drive cultural change and to be more collaborative and reduce those silos amongst different divisions and what have you. There's a organizational arc that we go through in the change journey. There's also the individual user change. Like me as Karuana, what I do on Monday morning is now different. Every morning what I do now is I pick up my mobile device, I look at my calendar to see what's happening, and then I go to my activity feed in Teams. All right, I eventually get to Outlook because most of my work has moved into Teams. I'm about 18 months in on my personal Teams journey. And because I'm a manager, I'm able to move my book of work, my area of responsibility, into Teams. And so almost everything I do is there. And then I go back and periodically look at my email. That's a huge change for me. I lived and died by my Outlook and my SharePoint sites previously. Now I'm in Teams and I can see all that together. So it's very different. So you have that user change, but in the middle, and I need to find a way to represent this on this slide that doesn't make it too busy, there's divisional or group change, and they're all at different points in that journey as you're moving things forward. That's the thing to keep your mind around, is that especially if you're in a company that has multiple offices, or maybe you're a field employee, or you have field employees and also corporate employees, the rate of their change is going to be different. And their experience is going to be different. And you have to be mindful of that as you and your champions and your collaboration improvement team move forward. That's one of the reasons that we identify personas along the way, so that we can be really clear about so for instance, a Microsoft salesperson in the field who might be on hotel Wi-Fi, in a customer site, they're going to have heavy dependence on their mobile device. And so I really have to focus on making sure that those mobile features are solid for them and that they're going to have a great experience there. They will eventually get to their laptop. But it's not like a corporate employee who may have a desktop device or be always on our corporate network and on our corporately delivered Wi-Fi experience. So keeping things like that in mind and the differences between the organizational change and the user and the different groups that they may be in really helps you to meet their needs, really. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about, helping people. I mean, that's why I get up in the morning, why I do what I do. I really believe in our mantra about empower everyone, and I think it can become real with projects like this that can transform people's businesses. So within this deck, there are additional resources that go into specifics for teams. For instance, the first 10 things to do in Teams. You know, getting your users to start with chat. At Microsoft, we have, you know, told folks that there's really not a reason to be using Skype for Business Online or the Skype client for chat anymore. The experience within Teams is not only better, but persistent. And so we are encouraging people to move forward to use chat in Teams, even though we do have interop available. We also encourage people to use their mobile device. I don't know how many of you use the Skype for Business Online mobile client. Not the best experience, especially for instant messaging. Because of the way the conversation history works, it can feel like messages get lost between your mobile device and your desktop. It's a pretty common experience that people have. And so once you start chatting and having conversations in Teams, it's extremely responsive. It's all right there. You never get that feeling of, hey, where's my chat? It's one of the reasons that mobile employees use WeChat and other non-corporate approved applications is because of that snappy experience. And so we knew that we needed to provide that, but in a secure way for the enterprise. And so your data isn't just out on some other service that really isn't approved by your organization. So really getting people to go big with that and embrace that mobile experience if that's part of your overall IT strategy, you know, we think is a good thing. Making sure to customize those channels and adding other parts of Office 365 to those channels as I was showing you, that's really the secret sauce of getting people to adopt it. Chat is great, and it's a great place to start, but where you really get value out of Teams is doing that integration with other applications like Planner and SharePoint and OneNote and pulling that all together around a particular topic. That is the secret sauce that really helps you to get the most from the product. So within this deck, again, I have additional resources that you can take a look at and use. I use these quite often in my L100 training course, and I'm building out an L200 course that's about modern project management. I don't know about you, but I hate writing status reports, so being able to create them as SharePoint news pages and syndicate them out is a beautiful thing, and so you'll be able to get that information. And then I have another slide which is pretty important, and it talks about the different ways to think about building out Teams in your Microsoft Teams implementation. I mentioned this idea of SharePoint sprawl and Teams sprawl. And people have a tendency when they think of Teams to automatically go to the organizational chart in their company. That's perfectly fine, not a problem there. But there's potentially more value in organizing it by area or cross-functional team around outcome. And that's on the right-hand side of this slide, the Northwest Sales District example. So every team gets a general channel. You can use it for announcements and new hire information. But these other channels have been created by the team owner: account plans, help needed, product update, and feedback. And so this ability to organize work for an entire district of people really brings folks together no matter what their role is. So you can do it both ways. Many organizations have both. At Microsoft, we do. We have a Microsoft Teams team that is based on our corporate vice president and the fact that we all roll up to him, but we also have functional areas for platform development, for my area, service support and readiness, things of that nature. So you can certainly, do both as you think about this, and have this complement any SharePoint intranet design that you are doing. Microsoft Teams is not meant to replace your intranet. We have an intranet at Microsoft. It's called MSW. We pin it in many channels just for visibility. People use it all the time. And it is a one-to-everyone publishing experience that is curated by a group of people inside our company. And large or small, there's usually some sort of curation involved in an intranet strategy. And with the new communication site, that becomes really a lovely thing to be able to do much more easily because of the innovations the SharePoint team has done. So I don't want you to confuse the two in terms of thinking about how do those two things work together. Your intranet is an outbound publishing, almost like newspaper, excuse me, to your employees, and Teams is the place that they create content together around a specific topic. And so here in the deck, I also have some other example teams and channels that can be created. Hang on just one second. I needed to cough there. Didn't want to blow the room out. Again, based on business scenario, the marketing group, the IT service area, an HR department, the core of modern project management, and a IT service incidents scenario. So all of these are kind of genericized examples of real-world situations that our customers are doing and that we at Microsoft are doing with Teams. And, the most successful Office 365 implementations for any workload, frankly, are those that have that champion element, that have information architecture and a vision behind them, and that are allowed to evolve. Because the Teams, more than any other product I've seen in a long time, is built to change. So when we first launched Microsoft Teams, even inside Microsoft, we said, hey, go create a team. Well, that's not actually the message. The message to our employees now is search and join a team that exists, and see if one exists first to join it, and then if you're going to create a team, think about all the people who need to be a part of it, and then go ahead and do that. I have some customers who are attaching provisioning to a form and to some business policy that controls the naming of the Office 365 group and the Microsoft team. So maybe in your organization, you want every team that is in the finance group to start with the letters FIN so that you can manage that in the long run. That's totally fine. You can do that with Microsoft Teams. So, having that information architecture, thinking about that provisioning and lifecycle process is super, super helpful, and will give you a higher quality implementation of Teams in the long run as you think about these different ways that you can enable it. This enablement strategy slide gives you the 5 pillars, basically, of ways that you can approach a Teams implementation. I have a lot of customers who, if you're early in your journey to cloud, and maybe the only workload you're using is Exchange Online, they use Teams as a way to onboard users to the rest of Office 365. Teams is integrated with OneDrive and SharePoint, gives people that ability to have chat and to have meetings. And so by doing it that way, you're minimizing the change fatigue for your employees, and you're really actually getting more out of the suite than the customers I see who are trying to do one workload at a time. That's a very common way of approaching an IT project. The problem is it doesn't get the most value for the users, and it actually extends their change fatigue because they're having to learn things in a serialized order rather than based around their daily work. One of the areas that I have in the toolkit for teamwork is called Your Digital Day, and it's based around the scenarios of what do you do in the morning over coffee? What do you do during your commute? How do you collaborate with others, right? These are the scenarios that people actually dig into. And so whether you're doing Teams first or only those core collaboration capabilities, without adding enterprise voice to the scenario, those, day in a digital life scenarios are the things that are going to help people over that hump. You can run Microsoft Teams side by side with Skype for Business, either on-prem or online. We are releasing more interoperability features as time goes on, and our Office 365 Skype to Teams convergence roadmap is really robust. You can get that information on our blog and on the Office 365 roadmap. And, we have some big moments in terms of making sure that Teams can do the things that Skype for Business does. For instance, having 250 people in a meeting. Right now, our limit is 80. Before we get to Ignite in September, we will match that 250 user limit. things like that. Federation between you and other companies, the interop scenarios. There's quite a bit that we're landing here at the end of June, and we'll have another big set of features again for Ignite in September. And so that side-by-side strategy, again, that's what we're doing at Microsoft. We're actually, it's good because it's great that we can do that from an IT perspective. From an adoption perspective, though, I'm not sure I really like it because I feel like it extends the transformation time. So my advice to customers is usually just, move as quickly through the side-by-side phase as you reasonably can based on the technical requirements of your project, because having the two together, while good for the IT team, can be confusing, to the users. So thinking about Teams Go Big and migration, if you already have Skype for Business either on-prem or in the cloud, that's definitely a recommended path. So before I hop over to Q&A, I want to make sure to leave some time for that. I do want to show you some of the resources that I'll make sure the whole group has along with my deck. The first one is called successwithteams.com. This is all of the documentation for the product, including an entire section on adoption and change management. So this is successwithteams.com, and the resources that we have, our approach, everything, most of what I've talked about today is available out here on this site. So any of the questions that you have about success, going from Skype for Business to Teams or doing a Teams implementation, you can get answered at this site. If you'd like to see some short how-to videos on Office 365 and Microsoft Teams, and especially some of what I call the better together scenarios, Teams and SharePoint, Teams and Yammer, Teams and Planner, whatever, you can come to Coffee in the Cloud. That's my show on YouTube, and we have quite a bit of content that's out here, including the full tutorial. And then the L100 course that's available free for folks. We will be publishing these in additional languages as well, and more content here. And then we are launching this month the Office 365 Champions Program. And this is a program where you sign up. It's a public program, and every 6 weeks we will have calls much like this with different members of the product groups. So myself from Teams, folks from Skype for Business and Yammer and SharePoint, to give you early insights into new features that are coming, driving adoption, best practices. And it's just a place where you can participate in a community of like-minded folks. And we have a forum out on the Microsoft technical community already called Driving Adoption. And so we encourage you to sign up for that. And I'll make sure the organizers and all of you have that link. It's aka.ms O365 Champion. And then lastly, we have these Microsoft training services. And so the site that I showed you, the Toolkit for Teamwork site, is a part of a free service that we're piloting now beginning in July that you get with your Office 365 license agreement. And basically you have two options. You have a SharePoint web part that you can put on your own training portal inside your organization, or you have this entire site that you can download as a package and then customize that includes information about all of the various workloads in the teamwork pillar. So SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. And it also includes this digital day information that I was talking about. And so what we do is we have customers who are using this as a starting point to create adoption portal for Office 365 services. So I used to be a customer of Microsoft, and I loved all the content, but it was everywhere. And it was just so difficult to keep it together. So finally found myself in a position to be able to do something about that. And so I created this site, and now we're syndicating it and making it available. It is English only at this time, but it's pretty simple to install it in your own environment. And then you can turn things on and off depending upon the services that you're using. Maybe you're using something different than OneDrive for personal storage, or maybe you just haven't done it yet. And so you can do that, but it gives you a running start at this information and all the training content that's available on the web from Microsoft, video and otherwise, that talk about what's happening, in Office 365. So I will make sure that everybody has, access to that. The announcement was made from the SharePoint conference, and this is the announcement that's available. I'm on the Microsoft Technical Community site, and it's also posted in the Driving Adoption Forum as well as the SharePoint Forum and the Teams Forum. So, the training services, we're excited about it because we just want people to have a jump start, right, at getting real value out of Office 365 and Microsoft Teams. And so we want to do everything we can to help folks. So that's my presentation. That was a lot of information. I'm hopeful that some of you have some questions, either specific questions about Teams from a technical perspective or questions about the adoption methodology. I am happy to answer them.
Okay. Wow. That was awesome. I just want to say, first of all, I learned a lot of things, and I work for Microsoft, so I love when I see a presentation like this. There are some questions, some Q&A that's happening in the Skype meeting, so Karuana, if you want to take a look at those. But I'm going to interrupt and interject since I have the microphone. I've got a question. Okay. So as the organizer of this group, we've been using the Skype meeting approach, and that's what we're doing here today. But my question to you, as somebody who uses Teams a lot and knowing the mechanics of this group with a lot of external attendees and everything, is it time yet for me to think about switching over to using Teams for the remote attendees of this meeting, or is there anything I should be watching for in terms of functionality to come out?
No, you're good to go. We have anonymous join, lobby management, many of the things that I would have said no in January, right? But now it's June, and we're absolutely ready. The only caveat is if you ever thought you were going to have more than 80 people right now, that would not work. We haven't launched that.
That's an aspiration for us.
Yes, right, exactly.
We hope to have that problem.
Yeah, we hope so.
Exactly. So, no, you really can, but here's my advice, though. I would keep your meeting in Skype for Business and do almost like a brown bag or a quick review of the meeting experience. It is a little bit different. And what I find is that people have some difficulty finding, like, hey, where's the mute button? The chat's in a different location. So the meeting experience itself is a little different. So I always tell folks, when you're running a meeting like this, do a quick, office hours or brown bag demo, what it's going to look like, and then change it.
Yeah, just like picking up a new musical instrument. You got to practice first, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so you've scrolled, or somebody scrolled there to the business case document question. I was going to direct you to that one. I think that's a good one to start with.
Sure. Okay. What is that question? I'm not.
Here, can you read off, Michael? We're projecting the chat window in the room.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Any business case document for Microsoft Teams we could use to convince our executive team. Because of the type of work we do, conducting audits and investigations on government programs, usually our management team shy away from direct collaboration tools. If we can get a business case document.
Oh, I see it here. Okay. That's a really good point.
Helpful.
I don't think I have a business case document, so I'm going to take that as a content request. Another thing I should mention is that we will be available in the government cloud this summer. And so that may also be helpful because we have a specific installation for our government customers. Pardon me. And so, my guess is you'll probably want to wait till then, but I will take that under advisement to make, a template for you, basically, because if you need it, somebody else does too. So, great request. Thank you.
Okay.
And when I think, can I answer one other thing? When I think of a business case document, there's a few elements to that. We do have documents that lay out the value proposition of Teams, but they don't always connect it to a business outcome, and certainly not for specific industries. And that's what I'm really thinking of. Is that what you meant, Carla?
Yeah. Well,
Okay. Perfect. That's awesome. Thank you.
All right. I have a question.
There we go. A question in the room?
Steve? Do you have a date of when Teams will be released to the government cloud? It's been pushed back several times, yeah.
Yes, later this summer is what I was just saying, yeah. Later this summer for me is a date.
Okay.
I realize that for you, it may not be a date.
And you said will it be the same scenario where we have to run Skype for business in conjunction with Teams?
No, and you don't have to today. So it's not necessary at all. But people do because they've had it before. But there's no requirement to run Skype for business to have Microsoft Teams work. It stands alone.
Yeah, hi, this is Don Miller. Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah, hi, this is Don Miller, and my question is for Microsoft, how many teams do you have from an IA perspective? Is there a limit to the total number of teams that you can have? And then what is the character length of the file name or of the team name in terms of how many characters you can go?
Oh, great question. So let me take them one by one. So how many teams do we have? I don't know the total number. Each individual, there's a 500,000 object limit within AAD Premium, and there is a limit, a numerical limit to how many objects one individual can create, which you can break by exception, but that's to keep somebody from tipping over the system if they had a script running, errantly or something. We certainly haven't. 200. Yeah, thanks. We certainly have not reached that limit at all, but it's a healthy amount. So out of the 230,000 accounts that we have inside Microsoft, we have about 66% of them using Microsoft Teams, and so it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I'd like it to be more, obviously, and as we go through the Skype for Business retirement process, obviously that number will go up. But and so the character limit is governed by the Office 365 group underneath it. I would need to go out to the documentation to get that number, but that is what governs the name of the Microsoft team. And so, for instance, things like you can have special characters, things of that nature. So.
And then what is the rough, is there a specific total number of channels that you recommend per team? I mean, just from an IA perspective, again, is it 50, is it 500, is it?
It's a great question, but it absolutely depends on the scenario. So there is a limit. 75 is currently the limit of how many channels you can have in a team. We'll be raising that. Just like we started out with a shallower number of members you could have in a team, now we're up to 2,500. So you can have 2,500 people in a team and 75 channels in that team. I don't recommend a lot, and here's why. I feel like if you really think about your work, this is the time to simplify, right? Pull things together from a topic perspective so that you can have a better user experience. Certainly in the Microsoft Teams team, where there are all those channels, they're organized by parts of the product and functions of our business, if you will. So it's pretty easy for me to find what we think of as the official kind of publishing location or collaboration location for a part of the product. What I have to make sure is that as we're designing this experience, for any one user, you want to keep down the number of teams they have to be a member of, because that's when it starts to get frustrating for people, is when they're a member of too many teams. So I really hone in on the IA of the team level, and then I let the individual teams do whatever they want with those channels. You don't want to over control that, because that's where the team can customize it for their needs and their scenario. So.
I got 2 questions for you. One, is there any plans to, because I know in Teams you can send emails into it, is there any plans to allow for distribution lists on Exchange to include those team addresses so that messages from Exchange can go into Teams?
Yes, there absolutely are. So what he's referring to, I'm just going back to my Teams implementation, I think I'm still presenting here, is the idea that each channel here, so a team overall, you can get a link to that team, but each channel does get an email address. And that is really helpful when you're helping people make the transition between doing their project work in email. I can simply forward the email into the team. And I think I actually have one in here that I did not that long ago, this one right here, and I can see that email within the conversation, right? So it's a good way to CC a channel and what have you. What you're referring to is the fact that distribution lists can't have that channel inside them. So yeah, we are working on that. I don't have a date for the feature though. There were some technical issues. But it'll come.
There was a related question on the chat conversation asking if the email address for the channel can be customized.
Not at this time.
Right now we generate an ugly kind of GUID.
Yeah, it is an ugly name. Now part of that is by design, right? Because we really don't want a ton of email going in the channel because it can feel very spammy. It's okay by intention and on purpose, but there are other ways to do notification in your workflows, much like what I showed you earlier with those intelligent cards. These adaptive cards are a great way to integrate in a workflow notification. It happens very simply with forms in Microsoft.com and Flow. That's basically how I created this workflow. And so I would say that things that are currently an email notification now, you should think about moving to Flow to have these actual channel notifications. They're formatted much better. You're in control of what shows there. They can be actionable, So anyway, it's a thought.
Yeah, and this is Joe Baxter. One of the things I tell my customers, again, I believe in limiting that as well, but where it comes really handy is if you have an email with a whole bunch of attachments on it, and you want those attachments to be part of Teams, rather than having to upload each one individually or whatever, you can forward that email, clean it up so it just has the attachments. They get saved into Teams, and then you can either take that message from Teams or do something with them at that point, but it's a time saver.
No, I totally agree with you. And we've had a lot of conversations about move conversation to Teams as a kind of option, right, in Outlook, things of that nature. Also, I have to say what I do is I save those attachments. I have my library from my Teams synced to my local device. So I just save as to the actual folders on my local device. So there's multiple ways you can do it, but you're absolutely right.
Yep, cool.
Same refer Teams and Yammer usage to go down. So let me answer this, Doug. I see this question. I would expect if the same group of folks get Teams, their Yammer usage goes down. Actually, that's not the case. So what's really interesting is Yammer really has a completely different scenario. So, for instance, when we launched Microsoft Teams in Microsoft, I launched it with a Yammer community because at that time, the limit for membership in Teams was 1,000 people. And the Yammer community is a public open forum for all of my employees to ask questions about Teams. And for any Microsoft employee in the room, it's aka.ms Teams Yammer. So you can always get to us. I have thousands of people in that group at this point. So that actually went up as Teams usage also went up. What changes is Skype for Business usage and email usage. Those are really the two scenarios where we see the most change when you onboard to Teams itself.
Hi, I have a question about the security for channels within a team. And I understand that Microsoft was looking at changing the access level so you can have different people
private channels.
Exactly. Yeah. So is there
coming.
Talk? Do you have a date on when that might be coming?
No. No, I don't. I guarantee something will land before Ignite in September, and additional, likely in preview with additional features like coming for instance, Government Cloud and what have you, but through the end of this calendar year. So what she's referring to is the idea that, great, I have a bunch of people in my tribe of Microsoft demonstration people, but what if I wanted to make a channel here in reporting and only have it available to certain members of that tribe? It's very important when you do the organizational structures. Often right now what we have to have is one team for the leadership team and one team for everybody in an organization, where what you really want is just a channel for more private information in that team. So that's a private channel that is coming. Also the idea of having a guest in a channel that only is invited to that particular channel, not the whole team. We do support guest access now if you enable it at a tenant level. So we're continuing to work on those things, and they're huge top priority in our user voice. So
on top of that, so in addition to that level within channels, is there any talk about perhaps extending that to the tabs?
No, not to the tabs themselves. So the tabs respect the permissions of the underlying experience. Let me clarify that. So in a files area, for instance, this is a folder in the SharePoint site collection that is associated with the Microsoft demonstration team. As I mentioned before, every team gets a SharePoint site. So if I wanted to have special permissions on this document right here, I could pop out to SharePoint and configure permissions on this particular document or a folder of documents, and that would be respected in Teams. So any permissions you have on documents that are special, meaning more restrictive or even more open in some cases, are respected in Microsoft Teams. I have another tab here, for instance. This is a content list. So this is a list in SharePoint, and I've pinned it inside Teams, right, so that I can see all my content production. This is where I'm going to add that request for business case, because this is my live thing. Now, if you didn't have rights to my content list, you wouldn't be able to see anything under the tab. You'd see the name of the tab, but the framed experience would be empty. So that's not ideal. I recognize that you would like people to not even see it at all. You know, that would be true tab permissions, but right now that's not the case. And I don't believe that's in the backlog.
Great.
Oh, and let me answer this question in the IM window. I put some links in the IM window. One of them was to the announcement for Microsoft Training Services. That is how you get the Toolkit for Teamwork site that I showed, or the web part that has playlists of training content for Office 365. So that you can also just, you can Bing or Google Microsoft Training Services, and I think the announcement will come up. But you sign up for the preview, that'll get you on the list, and we'll get you stuff.
Karuana, how much more time do you have to answer questions?
I have I can go for a couple more minutes. Let's take, say, 2 more questions, and then I can keep going. And if you have other questions, what I can do for the organizing committee, if someone wants to take notes on any questions I don't get to, I'm happy to answer them for you offline. And all your questions are really helpful to me because it helps me improve the documentation experience that we have. So keep them coming.
So I saw 2 things in the chat window about Yammer and Teams. And can you go to the slide which has the inner and outer circle conversation?
Sure, let me show that.
Yep. And talk to that, please.
Sure, of course. So we have what we call the inner and outer loops of conversation experience in Office 365. And Satya actually came up with this idea. It's the best way we have of really explaining where people's center of gravity in a conversation are. So my inner loop is people that I work with regularly, and I do that in Teams, right? I talk to these people every day. I know who they are. We have a lot of quick interactions about work that we're delivering together. I come and go from certain teams depending upon what I'm working on, like maybe a customer team or what have you, but it's always focused around some sort of output, and they're usually folks I know at least sort of well. That's the inner loop of people that I'm collaborating with, and that is done in Teams. My outer loop is a broad community. So, for instance, let's say my Microsoft Teams Yammer group that I have to support the product from a service management perspective. I'm a member of Evangelists at Microsoft. I do a lot of diversity and inclusion work. So I'm a member of the DIBS community at Microsoft. These are people who we share a common interest, but I don't actually know them, right? But they are a source of knowledge. I can crowdsource knowledge and innovation and ideas. I can participate in this broader community because of the shared interest. We have role-specific Yammer communities at Microsoft. So these are the kinds of scenarios that are really useful to leverage Yammer for in that outer loop. And then, of course, I have my email. That's ubiquitous communication. I get a lot of stuff from, HR or leadership announcements now are both sent in email and posted in Teams. One thing I want to encourage everyone to do is when you're thinking about communications in your company, especially if you're working with your internal communications leaders or HR people, it's not one or the other. Good communication is what we call omnidirectional. It's a multi-channel approach. You have to communicate with people where they are and be in multiple places. So we just did some reorganizations in our engineering team. They went out via email. They were posted in the announcement channel in our team, right? And so wherever people are, they saw that information. And as we continue to move the experience, I think we'll probably always do that because email's not going anywhere. And then in the center of this, of course, is SharePoint, and that's files, sites, content, that intranet that I was talking about, that curated experience for your employees. And so that's really the thought process there. I hope that helped.
Yes. Do we have time for one final question?
Yeah, one final question. Absolutely.
Okay. How about let's see, team and channel lifecycle? If teams are for projects, what happens at the end of a project? Is there policies where we can have channel go away after it's unused for some time, or what capabilities are there?
Absolutely. So because Microsoft Teams is built on top of Office 365 groups, all of our lifecycle management tools are available. At the moment, they are at the team level, not the channel level. What I do in my teams is when a channel becomes obsolete, I will change its name to Z-something for a while, so it goes to the bottom of the list, and then after a while, I'll simply delete it. It is a soft delete. If I go and delete a channel, it's a soft delete. An IT admin can restore that channel for up to 30 days. And then beyond 30 days, it is an actual hard delete. But there's also this renewal process. So what I'm showing on the screen here is we have an IT policy that says Teams, and by that I mean Office 365 groups. So a modern SharePoint site, this actually even applies to our classic SharePoint sites, and our Microsoft Teams or Yammer groups have to be renewed every 6 months. And so this policy comes up. If one of these was due for renewal, I'd have a little visual notification here of a little exclamation point, and then it allows me to renew. This one is set through November of 2018. I could renew it again if I wanted to. And I also get email notifications when my O365 groups need renewing. So you do have lifecycle management tools available to you because of the Office 365 groups infrastructure. And we definitely recommend that people put that expiration policy on their teams because this is how we now keep our own implementation fresh. If something hasn't been touched, if no one's willing to renew it in the renewal window, which is about a month long, then it really should go into that soft delete mode. There's a notification to the owners, again, then they could automatically click a button and restore it if they wanted. But we really like that. We really like that lifecycle management. So, yes, all available.
When a channel is deleted and it goes into that soft delete mode, does it also delete the SharePoint library behind it, or does that SharePoint library still exist on its own?
Well, because it's only a folder in the library, it still exists. Two things happen. So the folder will get deleted when the channel is deleted. So when you delete a channel, you're deleting anything that is associated with it. I just basically popped out to the SharePoint site behind my Microsoft demonstration team. And if you look here, this is there's one SharePoint site collection for every team, and every channel gets a folder. We're going to be improving the views inside Teams so that metadata will be supported, metadata on channel creation, things of that nature. That's all coming together in our relationship with the SharePoint team. But if I went through and say I deleted the experiments channel, this folder itself here would get deleted in that soft delete process. And if I restored it, I would be restoring both the folder and the conversations and the tab configurations as well. Yes, and you can declare channels as records, but what you're actually actually declaring is potentially the user there, and you have control over whether or not those records are that include the conversation and the files and everything in that channel. So,
but if the team is deleted, the site still exists.
No, if the team
no, it does not.
So the whole site, the whole SharePoint site gets removed.
The SharePoint folder,
the channel content stays.
The folder associated with that channel.
Deleted
So
channel.
if you delete group folders, you delete the team, then that's a SharePoint site. Then all
yeah, but let's be clear. If you delete the entire team, then yes, the SharePoint site will be deleted as well. And the Office 365 group, they're all connected. If I delete a channel, the folder goes away. If I delete a team, everything goes away.
So just to clear up, you said that if we declare the files as records and they delete the channel, the folder will still stay then.
Yes, if you delete it as a record, that's like a separate subject. But yes, if you delete those items as a record, it's going to go into a legal hold cycle, and that will alter the behavior of deletion.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah. That helps. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's all the time that we have for questions.
It is. Thank you so much for all those great questions. Again, Michael and everyone, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Write down more questions, send them to me, and I will get them answered for you. And, I encourage you along your team's journey. We have a lot of free resources to help you, including our fast track team that can come in and help you design one of these implementations. And so, we're here to help. So please get involved on the technical community.